The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. Introduction. Have you ever caught yourself making a decision that didn't quite add up in hindsight? Maybe you bought something on impulse or held on to a belief despite evidence to the contrary. The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli delves into the common cognitive biases and thinking errors that cloud our judgment. Dobelli, a Swiss author and entrepreneur, brings to light the subtle ways our minds deceive us daily. This summary will walk you through 20 key concepts from the book, each explained in an engaging and practical way. Remember, this is just a taste of the valuable insights Dobelli offers. For a deeper understanding and more examples, I encourage you to read the full book. It's a journey that can genuinely transform the way you think. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Patterns. Have you ever looked up at the clouds and seen shapes or faces? That's your mind searching for patterns. This tendency isn't limited to cloud watching. It affects how you interpret events in your life. The clustering illusion and survivorship bias are two ways we misinterpret randomness as meaningful patterns. Consider the stock market. You might notice a company's stock has risen for 5 days straight and assume it's on an upward trend. But markets fluctuate, and short-term patterns often don't mean anything. By seeing a pattern where none exists, you might invest unwisely. The survivorship bias happens when we focus on successful cases and ignore the failures. For example, stories of self-made millionaires who dropped out of college might tempt you to think education isn't necessary for success. However, we don't hear about the countless dropouts who didn't make it big. By only considering the survivors, you get a skewed view of reality. To think more clearly, remind yourself that randomness often lacks meaningful patterns. Before jumping to conclusions based on perceived trends, ask whether you're considering all the data or just the highlights. Chapter 2. The Influence of Social Proof and Herd Behavior. Imagine you're walking past a restaurant with a long line outside. You might assume it's worth trying because so many people are waiting. This is social proof at work, our tendency to follow the crowd when we're unsure what to do. Social proof can lead to herd behavior, where groups make decisions collectively, often without individual critical thinking. This can be harmless, like trying a popular eatery, but it can also have serious consequences. In financial markets, herd behavior can inflate asset bubbles, leading to crashes when the bubble bursts. To avoid this trap, practice independent thinking. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right for you. When faced with a decision, consider your own criteria and do your research rather than relying solely on others' actions. Chapter 3. The Pitfalls of Overconfidence. Have you ever been so sure about something, only to find out you were mistaken? The overconfidence effect is when we overestimate our knowledge or abilities. Similarly, the illusion of control makes us believe we can influence outcomes that are actually beyond our control. Take driving, for example. Many people consider themselves above-average drivers, which is statistically impossible. This overconfidence can lead to reckless behavior on the road. In business, entrepreneurs might overestimate their chances of success, ignoring potential risks and failing to plan adequately. Recognizing overconfidence involves humility. Acknowledge that you don't know everything and that some factors are outside your control. Seek feedback, question your assumptions, and prepare for different outcomes to make more balanced decisions. Chapter 4. Understanding Probability and Randomness. Do you buy lottery tickets thinking you might win big? or avoid flying because you fear a plane crash. These choices often stem from misunderstandings of probability and randomness. The gambler's fallacy is believing past random events affect future ones. If a coin lands on heads 5 times, you might think tails is due next. In reality, each flip is independent. Similarly, insensitivity to sample size means we draw conclusions from too little data, like assuming a medicine is effective after hearing about a few success stories. To think clearly, educate yourself about basic probability. Understand that rare events, like winning the lottery or being in a plane crash, are statistically unlikely. Make decisions based on realistic assessments rather than misconceptions about chance. Chapter 5. The impact of emotions on decision-making. Emotions play a significant role in how we make choices. The affect heuristic means we rely on emotions rather than logic when making decisions. If you feel good about something, you're more likely to perceive it positively, even if the facts don't support it. Loss aversion is another emotional bias, where the fear of losing something outweighs the joy of gaining something equivalent. For example, you might hold on to a declining stock because selling it would mean accepting a loss, even though selling might be the smarter move. To counteract these biases, try to separate your emotions from your decision-making process. Pause and analyze the facts. Ask yourself if your feelings are clouding your judgment, and consider seeking a second opinion to gain perspective. Chapter 6. The Traps of Confirmation Bias and Cognitive Dissonance. Have you noticed how we tend to seek out information that supports our existing beliefs? This is confirmation bias in action. We prefer to read news that aligns with our views and ignore or dismiss opposing opinions. When faced with conflicting information, cognitive dissonance kicks in, causing discomfort. To alleviate this, we might rationalize or ignore the new information rather than adjusting our beliefs. For instance, if you believe you're a healthy eater but indulge in junk food, you might downplay the health risks to resolve the dissonance. To think more clearly, actively seek out differing viewpoints. Challenge your assumptions and be willing to adjust your beliefs in light of new evidence. This openness leads to more informed and balanced decisions. Chapter 7. The Role of Framing and Anchoring in Choices. The way information is presented can significantly influence your decisions. This is known as framing. For example, a product labeled 95% fat-free sounds healthier than one labeled contains 5% fat, even though they're the same. Anchoring occurs when you rely too heavily on the first piece of information you receive. If a car is first presented at $30,000 and then offered at $25,000, you perceive it as a good deal based on the initial anchor, regardless of its true value. To avoid these traps, reframe information in different ways before deciding. Question initial figures and consider alternative perspectives. By being aware of framing and anchoring, you can make choices based on substance rather than presentation. Chapter 8. The Sunk Cost Fallacy and Escalation of Commitment. Have you ever continued watching a movie you weren't enjoying because you already invested time in it? That's the sunk cost fallacy, the inclination to continue an endeavor because of past investments, whether time, money, or effort. This can lead to escalation of commitment, where you keep investing in a failing project, hoping to turn it around. Businesses often fall into this trap, pouring more resources into unsuccessful ventures instead of cutting losses. To think clearly, focus on future costs and benefits rather than past investments. Ask yourself, if I weren't already involved, would I start this now? Letting go of sunk costs frees you to make better decisions moving forward. Chapter 9. The Misjudgment of Causality and Correlation. Just because two things occur together doesn't mean one causes the other. This confusion between correlation and causation can lead to faulty conclusions. For example, if ice cream sales and drowning incidents both increase in summer, it doesn't mean ice cream causes drowning. The false causality bias can also arise from seeing patterns where none exist. Superstitions, like believing a lucky charm brings success, stem from misattributed causation. To avoid these errors, look for evidence of a causal link before drawing conclusions. Consider other factors that might influence the outcomes and rely on scientific studies that control for variables to establish causation. Chapter 10. The Lure of Instant Gratification and Hyperbolic Discounting. Why is it so hard to resist a tempting dessert when you're on a diet? Hyperbolic discounting explains our tendency to prefer immediate rewards over greater future benefits. The immediate pleasure outweighs the abstract idea of future health. This bias affects long-term goals like saving for retirement or sticking to a workout plan. The benefits are distant, making short-term temptations harder to resist. To combat this, visualize your future rewards more concretely. Set short-term milestones that lead to your long-term goal, and remind yourself of the bigger picture when facing immediate temptations. Chapter 11. The Problems with Forecasting and Predicting the Future. We often trust experts who predict economic trends, election results, or weather patterns. However, forecast illusion highlights how frequently these predictions are inaccurate. Humans are not great at predicting complex systems with many variables. Over-reliance on forecasts can lead to misguided decisions, like investing based on a stock market prediction that doesn't pan out. To think clearly, treat forecasts as possibilities rather than certainties. Diversify your plans to account for different outcomes, and be prepared to adapt as situations change. Chapter 12. The Influence of Scarcity and the Endowment Effect. Have you ever rushed to buy something because it was labeled as limited edition? The scarcity error makes us place higher value on items that seem scarce, even if the scarcity is artificially created. The endowment effect occurs when we overvalue something simply because we own it. You might insist on a higher price for your used car than the market suggests because of your personal attachment. To avoid these biases, assess the true value of items based on their utility and market value, not perceived scarcity or personal ownership. This leads to more rational purchasing and selling decisions. Chapter 13. The Perils of Groupthink and Social Loafing. Working in groups can sometimes hinder performance due to groupthink, where the desire for harmony leads to poor decision-making. Members suppress dissenting opinions, leading to unchallenged and often flawed outcomes. Social loafing is another group-related bias where individuals put in less effort because they feel less accountable. In team projects, some members might rely on others to carry the load. To counter these effects, encourage open dialogue and critical evaluation within groups. Assign clear responsibilities to ensure everyone contributes equally, fostering a more productive team environment. Chapter 14. The Distortion of Memory and Hindsight Bias. After an event occurs, it's easy to believe you predicted it all along. This is hindsight bias, which distorts our memory of past judgments. It can lead to overconfidence in our predictive abilities. Our memories are also reconstructive. We might remember things not as they were, but as we wish they had been. This distortion can affect personal relationships and professional decisions. To think more clearly, keep records of your predictions and decisions. Reflecting on them can reveal patterns in your thinking and help you adjust your future judgments. Chapter 15. The illusion of knowledge and expertise. Sometimes, knowing a little about a subject makes us feel like experts. This illusion of knowledge can prevent us from seeking further information or accepting that we might be wrong. The chauffeur knowledge concept illustrates this. A chauffeur can recite a professor's lecture, but lacks the depth to answer questions beyond the script. Similarly, we might repeat facts without truly understanding them. To avoid this trap, acknowledge the limits of your knowledge. Embrace continuous learning and be open to admitting when you don't know something. This humility leads to genuine expertise over time. Chapter 16. Biases in evaluating others. We often attribute others' actions to their character, while excusing our own similar actions due to circumstances. This is the fundamental attribution error. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you might think they're rude, but if you do the same, you justify it because you're late. The halo effect causes us to let one positive trait influence our overall perception of someone. If a colleague is charming, we might assume they're also competent, even without evidence. To think clearly, evaluate actions and people based on specific evidence rather than general impressions. Consider situational factors and separate personal feelings from objective assessments. Chapter 17. The dangers of simplification and storytelling. We love stories because they're easy to understand, but this can lead to the story bias and narrative fallacy. We might oversimplify complex situations into neat stories, ignoring nuances and contributing factors. For example, attributing a company's success solely to a charismatic CEO ignores market conditions, team efforts, and timing. Oversimplification can lead to misconceptions and poor decisions. To avoid this, embrace complexity. Recognize that most outcomes result from multiple factors. Seek out detailed analyses and question stories that seem too tidy or simplistic. Chapter 18. Recognizing and overcoming ego and self-serving biases. Our egos often interfere with clear thinking. The self-serving bias leads us to attribute successes to our abilities and failures to external factors. This hinders personal growth because we don't learn from our mistakes. Acknowledging ego depletion, where self-control wanes after exertion, can help us understand why we might make poor decisions when tired or stressed. To overcome these biases, practice self-awareness. Reflect on your actions honestly, seek feedback, and be willing to admit and learn from errors. Cultivating humility can significantly improve decision-making. Chapter 19. Strategies for clear thinking and better decision-making. Understanding these biases is the first step toward clearer thinking. Implement strategies like mindfulness. Stay present and aware of your thoughts and feelings. Critical thinking. Question assumptions and seek evidence. Decision frameworks. Use tools like pros and cons lists or cost-benefit analyses. Seek diverse perspectives. Consult others with different viewpoints to challenge your thinking. Limit information overload. Focus on relevant data to avoid analysis paralysis. By actively applying these strategies, you can reduce the influence of biases and make more rational choices. Chapter 20. Embracing continuous learning and growth. Clear thinking isn't a destination but a journey. As you become more aware of cognitive biases, you'll notice them in daily life. Embrace this awareness as an opportunity for continuous improvement. Remember that everyone, no matter how intelligent, is susceptible to these biases. By committing to lifelong learning and remaining open to new ideas, you can refine your thinking over time. Consider keeping a journal to reflect on your decisions and thought processes. Engage in discussions with others who value critical thinking. And most importantly, be patient with yourself as you navigate the complexities of the human mind. Conclusion. By exploring these 20 chapters, you've gained insights into the common traps that hinder clear thinking. Recognizing and understanding these biases equips you to navigate decisions more effectively in both personal and professional contexts. The art of thinking clearly offers even more depth, examples, and practical advice to help you master your thought processes. I highly recommend reading the full book to enrich your understanding further. It's a valuable investment in yourself that can lead to more rational decisions and a clearer mind. Happy reading, and here's to your journey toward better thinking.